All right, if it's not my question about the final musician that you would see, I love this question as well. You are, for some reason, about to not be here anymore, and you have a final table. You have 4 seats at the final table. Obviously, you're going to have a table with your family, but this is going to be a separate table on a separate evening where you can sit with 4 people in the entire world. It can be whoever you want. Please now give out your 4 attendees, Riley Shan.
Gosh. Without thinking too deeply, my answer could change. I'm trying to think from a musician standpoint, I would love to Johnny Cash or Elvis or someone just that, from a long time ago. Eminem. I'm gonna go Johnny Cash, and then I'll go Jesus. He's probably got some crazy things some crazy stories.
Yeah.
Johnny Cash. I'm trying to think an athlete. Tiger would be super cool.
Ooh.
Tiger's got to go in there. I'm trying to think there's no one else really that's sticking out to me. I could do 4 musicians easily though, just to hear their stories. I'm gonna go Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash. Maybe Abraham Lincoln and Tiger Woods. That would be a friggin' that would be a dynamic. I'm gonna take Jesus out of the question. That would be a dynamic conversation topic. Let me hear yours.
Talk about your Mount Rushmore. Wow. This is going to be one that nobody in the world could guess that I would be actively wanting him to sit at my table. I have a large man crush on an individual by the name of Gordon Ramsay.
Wow.
I know. I don't know what it is. Growing up, my parents and I always watched Hell's Kitchen, little Master Chef, sprinkle that in there. I love the Food Network. But honestly, I'd honestly wouldn't mind Gordon screaming at me one time, just calling me a whatever his terminology is that he likes to, I wouldn't mind that. Although this conversation would obviously be fun and inviting. I would go Tiger as well. There may be some controversy. He's lived quite an interesting life. But I think even I just saw a video the other day of him caddying Charlie in this championship he's playing in. And I'm like, you know what? Tiger's at my final table. Athlete or movie star. I think, you gotta go.
Will Ferrell. I was thinking Will Ferrell would be a really good one.
But. Yeah, I would chuck Danny DeVito or Robert De Niro, or but then again, I would chuck Leo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt.
Oh man, there's so many are coming to my head now too.
And as for musician, I feel like it's a must. You have to chuck a musician in there. I think. I want to say Chad Kroeger, Nickelback, or I would probably go even a Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, and Elvis.
Okay, you gotta pick one though.
Okay, fine. Sorry. Okay, so Gordon Ramsay, Tiger Woods. I'm going Danny DeVito, and I'm going. Elvis Presley. It's done. Okay. Yeah. But anyways, welcome everyone.
I only picked 3. I didn't pick 4. And I had a good one come to my head. I'm going Al Capone.
Oh, wow. That is out of left field, but that will do.
Let's go. Let's jump into the episode.
All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. I believe this is episode 29, powered by our amazing TorchPro. My name is Tyler Smith, and this is my co-host, Riley Shan. Today we had just a great human being. I think we have both followed the Same Here global mental health movement for quite some time, and Riley more or less has gotten gotten in touch with Eric Kussin, who runs the Same Here movement. And I think we could have chatted for 4.5 hours. I think it was just the insight, the way that he, just looks at the world and the perspective that he has. I mean, don't get me wrong, his story is incredible. It's powerful. It's unbelievable. But I mean, I think what he's done now with his platform and the way that he can, really make people think and make people think, and especially in situations that are uncomfortable, like the suicide space, like the college athlete suicide space. I just had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I think I hope you guys enjoyed it. Riles, your take.
Yeah, no, you summed it up well. I mean, he's great. I love what he's doing. Just really like light bulbs go off when I read his posts and I see his perspective, and it kind of allows me to alter my perspective based off kind of the way he comes at things regarding mental health. So I think that's one thing just to pay attention to is just when you read these stories about people struggling, actors, athletes, people with platforms, and I mean news stories that come out about people struggling, like just have some thoughts in the back of your mind that we're all kind of struggling, and the more we can do this together, and I think Eric talks about the more we can hold each other's hands and get through this together, the better off we'll be. So we enjoyed talking to Eric, and he's a great guy, like you said, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
And if you aren't following the Speak Your Mind Instagram, as the kids say nowadays, WYD, because we don't have enough things that we can just shrink into small little, WYD, all you listeners. Please head on over. We do some fun things weekly. I look forward to crushing my boy Riles every week in New Tune Tuesday. But yeah, we got an Instagram. And also, before we jump into today's interview, we wanted to highlight that Premier Blue Cross is a proud sponsor of Speak Your Mind. 1 in 5 people deal with mental health conditions every year. And as we have this conversation today with Eric, I mean, we definitely learned that 5 in 5. So no matter who you are, it's okay to ask for help. Premier Blue Cross, always in your corner. Now let's jump into the conversation.
Eric, welcome to the show. I know Tyler and I are super excited to have you on. Just so much of your stuff through your Instagram account, through Same Here, all of the movement stuff is so relatable and so powerful to us. So I know we've been counting down the days to this show, so welcome.
Thank you. And, I'll say on my end, obviously, Riley watching you play, and then Tyler, knowing the story from a distance in Humboldt, it's amazing to see different people doing different things out in the space, but then being able to come together and collaborate around it makes it pretty special. So appreciate you guys having me. Yeah.
I mean, I know your journey has been kind of crazy. When we spoke, I think we spoke in the summer before I even came to Buffalo. We had the phone call, and I mean, you told me your story, and it was crazy, unbelievable. So I want to start there. I know it can be long-winded, so maybe we'll have to interrupt you here and there and ask you some more specific questions and things like that. But I think Ty didn't get that opportunity to listen in, and it'd be important for him and our listeners to hear where this all started, hear how you kind of came about with the Same Here movement. And then we can go from there. So, I mean, maybe bring it back to sort of your college experience, your experience with sports, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to interrupt me at any point along the way, because I can get long-winded. I've gotten better at condensing it. So hopefully folks will follow along and appreciate the linearity of it. But, you mentioned going back to college. I think like many people who probably listen to your podcast, big athlete growing up, played every sport that I could, loved watching every sport that I could, go to Cornell University, walk onto the basketball team there. So I still have my foot in sports. And then I graduate and I get a job at the NBA league office, where my boss was a guy named Mark Tatum, who's now the deputy commissioner of the NBA. Unbelievable guy, super just down to earth, and really showed me the ropes in the industry. And David Stern was a commissioner of the NBA at the time. And so I got asked to start presenting on what was called the business of basketball to players like you, Riley, but on the basketball side of things. And it was at a time when the majority of the big names in the NBA were guys like Kobe Bryant and Amari Stoudemire and Kevin Garnett. all guys who had come directly out of high school into playing in the NBA. And so their understanding of where the money came from, not surprisingly, was not very strong, right? They thought that they were these billionaire owners who said, this guy's worth this many millions, I'm going to pay him this, and that guy's worth that many millions, I'm going to pay him that. So this concept of the business of basketball presentation was to go in market and work with the teams. I wasn't working with individual players. So you'd have everyone from the equipment manager to the video coordinator to the GM to the team, the actual players themselves. It's about 30 in a room at a time, and present on the way in which revenues are created. And why is that important? Because it's called hockey-related income in hockey. In basketball, it's called basketball-related income. You have to show them that it's ticket sales and sponsorship sales and arena revenues to show that the fans and the people who put money into the sport create the revenue streams, and then you get a percentage of that revenue stream that comes in the form of what your base salaries are through, collective bargaining, right? And so if the pie grows, obviously your piece of the pie grows, right? That's why there's a salary cap. You remember this well, Riley. I'm going into more detail in this story now than I usually do. Is there was a time when it was 57% for the players and 43% for the owners. And we had a pretty long lockout where it went down to 50-50. And that was because for everyone who thinks the NHL teams make so much money, well, the way that it was happening, you still had about 20 teams that were losing between $1 million and $10 million a year based on the way the revenues were split up. So they needed to even that out. They took the player percentage down a little bit, the owner percentage up a little bit. Probably not the most favorable thing for the players, but hopefully that example gives what I was doing at the time was I was helping the players to understand how the revenues are generated and where their salaries come. Get told that if I want to do anything in this industry, I have to learn how to sell. And I'm not a sales guy. I don't consider myself a sales guy. I'm a marketing guy. I'm a relationship guy, right? Sales is a dirty term. But I go out to Chicago when I was saying, maybe we've crossed paths in other cities. So I was in Chicago. The Chicago Sky started up a WNBA team that was the first independently owned franchise outside of NBA ownership. And so at 25, 26 years old, I get this opportunity to be their director of sales and service, a position I wasn't going to get in the NBA side of things at that young of an age. So I do that for 2 years. That leads, ironically, given that I had presented to Amari back in the day, to a director of sales and service job with the Phoenix Suns and Phoenix Mercury, right? And actually bringing hockey into it, the Phoenix Roadrunners at the time, right? An ECHL team. Claude Lemieux was our coach. Really, really interesting backstory there, right? We just to break up the mental health conversation. I know. So the types of promotional nights we had for the Phoenix for the Roadrunners was hairy back night, right? Like whose back was the hairiest? Like bad breath night. They had a game used ice night where they just filled up test tubes with water and they handed it out at the end saying this is game
It's a
used
little
ice.
different now.
Yep, a little different. So I did that for 3 years. Then I came back east to New Jersey, became vice president of sales and service with the Devils. We go on this awesome run in 2012 to Stanley Cup final. Sucks going that far and losing, but we lost to the LA Kings in 6 games. Then I find myself, after 4 years with the Devils, I get this opportunity to become the chief revenue officer with the Florida Panthers. New ownership group came in. Vinny Viola, who's still the owner now, military background, West Point grad, bringing in a ton of military brats to run the team. I don't know where the hell I fit into that because I wasn't in the military, but I guess some type of confidence that he has in me that I've been able to run revenues for these other teams. And so I go down there, and guys, like this is where now the mental health thing comes in, and we can have some back and forth, certainly ask questions. But for everyone out there who's thinking like, oh, mental health, like you always know that it's coming around the corner. You know it's going to take you down at some point. I was 34 years old, single, living in South Beach, making more money I'd ever made in my life with no state income tax, okay? Living on Las Olas Boulevard, huge apartment overlooking down the bars. Like life could not have been better situationally. I'm one step away from my dream job, which is becoming a team president. And what could be bad, right? So that is my life for the first 6 months of working at the team. And all of a sudden I start to notice that I'm losing interest in things outside of the office. And I didn't know why that was happening, right? Okay, my friends are going out to eat after work. You guys go do your thing. I'll meet you another day. I didn't want to go to the gym. I would come home and feel heavy, like I was, I'd throw myself on the couch and literally pass out on the couch, like we see in the movies. You just fall over on the couch and you lay there. Not wanting to play in my own leagues, right? And so these things are like evaporating from interest in my life. But and here's a key learning for people is when you've got that one thing, you guys are hockey players, right? When you've got that one thing that you love doing and that's clicking, that's fool's gold for you because you've got something that gets you up and going every single day. You're getting the dopamine hit from that. And it's like, awesome. Even though those other things are gone away, nothing's bad because that's still good, right? And that was my take with working for the Panthers. Like, we're starting to fill more seats. We're starting to sell more sponsorships. We're actually seeing this team start to get out of some of the conundrums that it's been in the past where we're not comping people the way that we used to and just filling a building with fake fans. Like, things are going in the right direction. But the coming in at 7 a.m. and the leaving at 12 at night, or 12 in the morning really, and rinse, wash, repeat, keep doing that. Eventually, okay, well, that catches up to you somewhere. And I remember waking up one day and it was like pushing myself out of quicksand to get out of bed. And I walked over to the closet and it was like I had cinder blocks on my feet. And I look in the closet and it feels like a bomb has gone off in the closet. Even though everything's organized, I can't make out, do I wear a button down or a polo or slacks or jeans? And I did what I think a lot of people do. You guys can tell me if you can relate to this, but like I tested my brain because my brain didn't feel like it was working. So I did the worst thing possible, which has made my sympathetic response go even higher by being like, well, things aren't working. I got to figure out to make sure that my brain is working. So I took a picture of my nieces and I was like, okay, these are my two most important little people in the world to me, Rebecca and Kaylee. What are their middle names? And I couldn't remember their middle names. So I'm like, when I say that's the worst place to be, my brain is now spiraling because it's like, how could I go from being this functional human being to not remembering the middle names of people who are this important to me? Back to sports analogy. What do we do when we don't feel right? We clench our fists, we grit our jaw, and we go white knuckle it. I'm going to make it happen. So what do? I get in my car. I definitely didn't shower that day. I didn't brush my teeth. Like, it was awful. And I get in the car and I get into the office and I'm sitting behind my desk. And I remember looking out at the staff, and it's usually like, okay, season ticket sales are there, individual game sales are there, group sales are there. I can't make out where anyone is. It feels like it's Grand Central Station. You guys might be a little young to remember this reference, but instead of my emails looking like nice, clean lines one after the other, it looks like light brights, right? Like the game where the lights flash at you. That's
I remember that.
So that night, and I know, Riley, you've been a part of these presentations, whether there's been a scratch or you've been injured or something like that. I have to give a presentation to the fans that we had come out as prospects. When you're chief revenue officer, your job is to be rah-rah and get people excited about buying the team and being a season ticket holder or corporate partner. So we get 50 prospects that are coming in the suite between the first and the second period. My brain is just not working that day. And I remember writing down on a piece of paper, hi, my name is Eric Kussin. I'm the chief revenue officer with the Florida Panthers. It's nice to meet you. These 50 come in the suite and I look at them. I've never quit anything in my life because I'm a stubborn SOB. And I read off of that index card, that line that I just shared with you, and my brain just goes blank, like not blank, but dark blank. And I go, this is Matt, our team president. He's going to take it from here. And I walked out. And again, still to this day, I don't think I quit. I think my brain literally shut down on me in that moment. Okay, we'll talk about what that shutdown is. But I go back to my desk and Vinny comes to me after the game, the owner, and couldn't have been more supportive. This was 2015. So it was a time when people were not talking about this stuff. And he's like, Eric, is everything okay? And when I say about this stuff, I didn't know what this stuff was. Do I have a traumatic brain injury from playing sports? Is it a brain tumor? As weird as this sounds, did I have an aneurysm and it's like infiltrating my brain right now? Or is it this mental health thing? And so he's like, Eric, we love what you're building here. We never leave a soldier out in the battlefield. Take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, come back, hit the ground running. And when I heard 3 months, trying to continue to tie it back to like what people think about this space, I did, and you know, Tyler, you're up in Canada, right? So like in the US, they promote directly to consumer with pharmaceuticals. So when I heard 3 months from my owner, I was like, oh, I've seen those commercials where a sad face and a gray cloud becomes a happy face and the sky is blue and the birds are chirping and the sun is shining 15 seconds into a 30-second commercial. I don't think it's going to be that easy. But when we grow up taking, you know, amoxicillin, penicillin, and Levaquin because we had strep throat, bronchitis, or pneumonia, your thought process is when you don't feel well, you take that medication and that medication eventually makes you feel better. So hearing 3 months, I was like, it's not going to be as simple as that commercial, but eventually I'll find the right combination of drugs that pop me out of whatever I have and I'll feel better. That was my plan. And I go back to New York. I leave all my shit down in Florida and I go to the first doctor. I'm given 5 prescriptions, right? So an SSRI, a benzodiazepine, a booster to the SSRI, an off-label drug called Namenda, just one thing after another. And the doctor goes, you have a shit ton of depression on top of a shit ton of anxiety. You need heavy artillery for this to be knocked out of you. So, you know, you do what's told of you, you know, when that's the case, like these are the experts, I got to do what they say. That led to 2.5 years of absolute dysfunction. I did not leave my bed other than going to the doctor's office. I woke up every morning staring at the ceiling with what I call no original thoughts. So we take for granted as human beings that we wake up every day and we go, my mouth tastes like shit, like I need to brush my teeth, or I sweat the night before because it's too hot. I got to take a shower. I've got this, you know, responsibility, or I got practice today. I got to. When you wake up and there's nothing, your brain isn't telling you anything, it's scary as could be. Like the world just seems flat and dull and nothing. So 2.5 years, 52 different psychotropic drug combinations. So if anyone ever wants to drop a DM and ask about a certain drug, I'm happy to. But why 52? And this is an important thing for people who are trying to get better. When you're a stubborn SOB that says, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play, shoot me up with whatever you need to get me out on that ice or on that field or on that court, I was willing to take whatever they gave me. So I was literally the perfect patient and the perfect, I'm going to say it, customer, because they knew that they could keep throwing more shit at me and I was going to keep taking it. Finally, I got a doctor who says, you got to try something different. Let's try TMS therapy. So they put a helmet on my head and they shoot electromagnetic waves into my brain, trying to wake up the synapses. I'm not trying to talk down meds, not trying to talk down TMS, but they didn't work for me. I did 23 sessions, 23 days in a row of the TMS therapy. I've got some weird pictures of me in helmets I could share. And I wake up the morning of the 24th at 4 in the morning of 24 days in a row doing this. I'm using my hands to show you. And I'm sitting on my hands because this thought is running through my mind over and over again. It wasn't a hallucination. I was hearing voices. It was just a thought in my brain, a compulsion, a magnetic pull that said, swallow that bottle of pills, swallow that bottle of pills, swallow that bottle of pills. I'd never looked at a bottle of pills as something dangerous before in my life. Where the hell does this thought come from, right? We'll get back to where the thought comes from. But so the reason I'm sitting on my hands is because I can't stop myself. So for everyone who thinks suicide is a choice and that why did that person make that decision? What could have been so bad in their life? Let that be case in point. And then the hundreds of people and maybe thousands of people I've spoke to one-on-one who've had suicidal thoughts, these things come over us. They become compulsive error message. Yeah, right.
So through the whole process, like even when you started feeling like shit and it started to go downhill fast, you didn't have any suicidal anything like going on in your brain where
that's the thing that freaked me out so much, right? Like I thought I was doing everything I needed to get better when I'm laying in that bed, even though I feel like shit. It's like I'm doing this because I need to be on this merry-go-round to find the right chemicals that balance out the imbalance. But I never had an ideation like that. And for everyone who's trying to figure out because they've never had an ideation, or for the people who've had them and want to be able to relate, I'll use these scenarios. And I'm sorry for the trigger warning for anyone out there. Why do we look at a knife sometimes? And for some of us, oh, that's what cuts up meat. That's how I make my steak edible. And some of us look at a knife and go, what happens if I took that knife and dragged it across me? How does our brain see the exact same object two ways? How do we drive over a bridge and we go, oh, that's a big structure that connects two land masses over water. It gets me from one landmass to the next. And then other people look at a bridge and their mind's going, go over it, go over it, go over it, right? It happened with me with trains. A train would come by on the platform and my brain would be like, hurl yourself into it, hurl yourself into it. And these were not things I chose. By the way, to your question directly, Riley, that thought with the train didn't happen until later after. So the first example of feeling it, and where does that come from? I think I've got a theory. We'll get to it. But like, how does the brain develop that thought? Because the common misconception is we're losing people to suicide because they're going through difficult events and they're making the choice that things are harder than being here. And I think that's a bunch of bullshit. And it's not fair to all the people that we're losing by suicide. And it's keeping the narrative backwards, right?
Right.
So, and please, again, I love the back and forth, so interrupt me at any point. So I go inpatient to a psych ward, right? I love using the terms because they don't make me feel shameful at all. And it's ridiculous that these are still the terms. So it's kind of like humor while at the same time ridiculousness. It's called the psych ward. It's called the mental hospital. It's called all these things. On podcasts, I usually don't say the name of the hospital so they don't think that I'm trashing them. But it was a very reputable one with, top ratings. Okay. And I go inpatient and I meet with the attending psychiatrist. I'll say this, she had Harvard degrees all over her wall, top doctor plaques everywhere. And she just looks at my chart and she goes, Eric, you've tried everything there is. Your last resort is to do ECT, electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy for those of us who've seen it in the movies. And I was less scared about getting shock therapy than I was hearing the term last resort. Because no one on this planet, am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Oh,
or no?
by all means, yeah.
So no one on this fucking planet should ever be told, no matter what they're fucking going through, that this is a last resort. I don't care if you have a hangnail and they're telling you that you're going to be gangrenous because you didn't get it taken out, or you've got this thing called mental health. There are zillions of things that you can try. And here, because I tried the meds and the talk therapy with the TMS therapy, my last resort is to get my brain shocked and there's nothing else that can help me. So when you're told that, you do what they say. I did 12 sessions inpatient of getting my brain shocked into seizure, skipping the details of the misery of waking up, not knowing where you are, what your name is, what country you were born in. And I leave the hospital after 5 weeks feeling no better than I had the 2.5 years prior, thinking logically, unless Merck or Pfizer invents some miracle pill that pops me out of this and makes me feel better, I'm treatment resistant and I'm never getting better. So where the story turns for the better, and then this is where then the movement and the idea behind the organization came about. So I meet this woman who practices integrative psychology. My parents went to like a course she was teaching, and my parents come back from course and they're like, Eric, we met this woman. She treats differently than all these other doctors you've been to. Please go see her. Please go see her. So I'm sitting on her couch. And again, you guys will relate to this because you've been to your own professionals. I'm expecting, even though they're saying she treats differently, the cadence and the chronology of every doctor appointment I've been to, 3 segments, always the same. Tyler, it's very nice to meet you. What are your symptoms? And you list your symptoms. That's segment 1. Tyler, based on your symptoms, here's your diagnosis. That's segment 2. And I was diagnosed with everything from melancholic depression to anhedonic depression, PTSD, OCD, ADD, ADHD, like you name it, every single group of alphabet soup letters in the DSM-5. And then the third segment was always, based on your diagnosis, here's how we're going to treat you. And that's where the 52 different meds came in, right? So this doctor is very different. She goes, Eric, okay, I have one question for you. Who is Eric? Tell me the story of your life, right? And so for people who are hearing that, like, think of Tyler and his story of what happened with the bus accident. Is that Tyler's whole life? No. But it's a big piece of his life, and it's part of what he would tell in this story. And the bus accident is not this thing called PTSD. The bus accident is this thing called the bus accident. That's an important distinction. Something happened to him, right? So I don't know what I'm revealing as I'm sharing my story. All I know is this doctor wants to get to know me. So I feel very disarmed right now. So I just, I'm in the middle of three boys. We're a sports crazed family. My older brother, and then this is what starts coming out of me. From the time I'm 8 years old, my older brother breaks his femur bone and is put into a body cast for a year and homeschooled. Heals from that and gets diagnosed with ALL, children's form of leukemia. So late 80s, early 90s, not the best prognosis when you have childhood leukemia, but miracle, he goes into remission. Month later, here's hockey comes into play. He's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends on the way to an Islander game. Car loses control. He's in the back, no seatbelt in the back. Lot flies out, lands on the Meadowbrook Parkway. You've been on it many times, Riley. If you play the Islanders, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eyes, in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college, gets a relapse of the same leukemia he had as a child. Now they have to give him a stronger dose of the chemo, which is doing a great job of knocking out the cancerous cells, but unfortunately, it's also breaking down a lot of the healthy cells in his body. So you see his hair falling out, but you also see his joints breaking down, hunched over more. I get a call, I'm up at college at this point, to come meet them back down in Long Island where he's at the hospital. 105 fever he's developed. Body goes into septic shock from the chemo treatments, just making his body acidic. Septic shock into a coma. Now imagine having a family member who's in a coma for 3 months, and the doctor's telling us, we don't know if he's ever going to wake, and if he does wake, if he's ever going to have any brain activity. So those 3 months, like, we're throwing, let's hope that a miracle happens. Miracle does happen. He wakes, full cognitive faculties about him, having conversations with us, but his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock. So he needs to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father donates a kidney to him. That all ends. I get that job at the league office that I was telling you about. And unfortunately, 3 of my close friends, 22 and 23 years old, pass away back to back to back of either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed heart conditions, like freak things. One guy collapsing on a treadmill, one guy walking with boxes up a flight of stairs. So it was just one thing after another. And so why am I sharing that full detail of the story in a conversation we're going to have back and forth? Because the doctor stopped me at that point and she goes, Eric, what else happened to you as a child and a young adult that impacted your mental health that I need to know about? And I go, I'm 35 years old and I've been sitting in my bed, laying in my bed for 2.5 years, being told I have a chemical imbalance with all these different names and trying to find the chemicals that balance out my imbalance. What the hell does that have to do with the story I just told you of my life, where you just asked me to tell you who I was? And you stopped me short at 22, 23 years old. And she gave a great analogy that I think athletes, especially the folks who listen to your podcast, will appreciate. She goes, Eric, if you had a front row seat for an NBA basketball game, you'd be running up and these basketball players are running up and down the court. You're entertaining your clients in a nice suit, and the sweat is hitting off them and splashing and hitting your suit, or they're diving for a loose ball and they land in your lap. The sweat gets all over your suit. You go home that night, you take a shower, you put your suit away for the dry cleaner, and you come in nice and clean the next day. What happened was you had a front row seat, but it was for the game of life. Right now, Tyler, every time I'm saying this stuff, I'm thinking of you and your lived experience. So you had a front row seat for the game of life, but the game of life wasn't represented by a basketball game. It was represented by your brother in a muddy wrestling ring and your friends in a muddy wrestling ring. And every move they made to stay alive against the game of life, the mud was splattering from them trying to pin that game of life and hitting you. And you did everything but focus on the mud. You were looking at the Jumbotron and how nice the HD board was, and the LED and how nice the colors were, and the music and how good the music was, and the fans dancing. So you didn't realize that mud was caking up on you. Back to the example of being in Florida, single guy, South Beach, this is awesome. Well, the mud's getting heavy, and eventually that mud gets so heavy, your brain can't deny it anymore, and it literally took you down off the seat. Now, think about your story, Tyler, right? Like, you watched the Bucks accident happen in front of you, so you were in it. I wasn't in the bed with my brother when he was in the coma. I wasn't in the car when that accident happened. So I get a little pissed off when she's telling me that this is what mental health is, because I go, all we need to do is watch shit happen to other people in our lives, and that impacts our mental health. Take me out of the equation. Take the average 15-year-old watching their parents get into fights and get a divorce, watching their parents lose their job and potentially lose the house, watching their two best friends' friendships dissolve and them never talking again, or their friend being broken up with by the first time and being crushed by that relationship, or their friend being bullied in the schoolyard or verbally abused, or their friend coming up to them and telling them they were sexually abused, or dealing with the sickness of a loved one or loss of a loved one. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through one, some, or many of those things by 15 years old. If that's what mental health is, everyone on this planet's mental health has been impacted, and that's not the narrative that's out there. I was like, so explain to me, because if I had known that shit that you just told me, instead of doing stadium stairs and doing, bench press, I'd have been working on this because I'd been knowing this was been impacted, and then I wouldn't be in this place that I'm at. Why is that not the narrative? And so you could tell I get heated about it. So she tells me to calm down, and I'll land the plane in a second. Like Eric, she's like, yes, everyone's mental health is impacted. Yes, you're on point. Let's help you get healthy first. Then we'll talk about like how we address this whole rest of society thing. So she gives me the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So I start to learn about brain-body connection. And she sends me to this weekend course called The Art of Living. I'm the only male, only one under 40. Riley was laughing this when I told him it the first time. So only male, only one under 40, only one born in this country. So it's me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. Okay, like a movie script could be written on it. And I'm a fish out of water, but now I start learning from the practitioner, why is doing rhythmic breathing patterns going to start to normalize my central nervous system? We think of mental health as this chemical imbalance that lives up in a cloud above us. It's not what it is. It's changes to the vagus nerve and the tone of the vagus nerve. It's the way the cells become inflamed. It's the way the amygdala becomes overfunction. It's the way that our gut and our brain don't talk to one another. It's the way that it changes our sleep-wake cycles and our circadian rhythm. Like, this is what messes us up. It's biology, and no one's teaching us this. And we think we just either have the chemical imbalance or we don't. And so, mentioned landing the plane, I think a good way to do it will be kind of explaining how Theo Fleury got involved with what we did. Is I went to the largest nonprofit websites in our country as I started to heal from these breathing practices. And I go and I look and I see consistency in all the messaging. And you think consistency is a good thing. We want to change messages. Like, let's get people talking this way. The consistency, and that was in 2017, is the same consistency now in 2022, 5 years later. And it's consistency that moves us backwards. And I think that there's nefarious reasons why, but we could argue that if we want. The 3 things that I see, first is they all start with the statistic 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. The second you start with that statistic, you've made the topic binary. Tyler's mentally ill, and then everyone else that are his 4 friends that he hangs out with, they're fine, healthy, normal, and okay. So now you're in a different category than them. So that's number 1. Number 2, what do they do to normalize the conversation? Here's our campaign. Stop the stigma. Break the stigma. Okay, hockey now, amazingly, because I just got it yesterday, has stick it to stigma. Okay, when you put an action word in front of stigma, you're basically giving people a command, because the term stigma means human beings are forming unfair opinions and judgments about other human beings. When you say stop, stomp, break, erase, stick it to, you're saying, you motherfuckers over there who are being mean to us poor people over here who are sick, you need to stop doing what you're doing. So we're taking this binary topic of have it and don't have it, and we're saying, fuck you, you're being wrong, you got to stop doing what you're doing. That moves us further apart. And then the third piece, which is where Riley's role comes in being a public figure, is the way they were sharing that it's normal to go through this. Britney Spears has depression. She's part of the 1 in 5. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety. She's part of the 1 in 5. You're not alone. Well, Britney Spears has depression and shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. Kanye West has bipolar, says crazy things about his family and thinks he could run for president, right? Add those 3 things up. It's for 1 in 5 people. Let's stop stigmatizing that poor group. And if you want to know if you're in that poor group, do you run off the basketball courts in panic attacks like Kevin Love and try to kill yourself like Michael Phelps? How many people are raising their hand when you come to an event, Tyler, that you speak that's voluntary and going, that's a group I'm a part of. I don't need to be mandated to come to this. I want to self identify in this group. It doesn't happen. And that's why we're here to talk about this. Where I ended up getting, I mentioned, I'd say Theo Fleury involved, is he, much like what Riley does, much like what you're doing now, Tyler, Theo was the earliest one that I saw in 2017 who was not out there going, I'm Theo Fleury with PTSD, here my PTSD journey. Theo Fleury was out there going, I was raped by my male coach 150 times, and my dad was an addicted gambler, and my mother tortured me with religion and telling me that I wasn't going to salvation, there was no path towards heaven for me. And that destroyed me. And I turned to drinking and drugging and sexing and gambling my $50 million that I made away. I was like, that's the story people need to hear. Not Theo's in particular, but that thread of what did you live through? What were the events? How did it impact the way that you feel and emotionally what you go through? What do you turn to deal with that emotional pain that was maladaptive? Where did it lead you to? And now what have you learned from it now that you realize that those were all the wrong coping mechanisms? That means 5 and 5. Everyone is a part of it, but that's not the narrative that's out there. So
wow. I wanted to interject so many times, Eric, but like not in a bad way, but then I'm just like, I can't stop listening. Like this is so profound and something that unfortunately just not a lot of people think about in that way. And I think that's the one thing I want to touch on initially is that foundational impact of your childhood, of your parental upbringing, just your upbringing in general. How was that even for you to have those conversations as you're going through this, as you're starting to understand that it's not just a chemical imbalance? This is my trauma. This is my events. This is my life. This is what I've been through. How did you find those initial conversations, with the people around you, with your parents, with your loved ones? Like, because I can imagine that's a hard kind of thing to balance, because it's not a case of you're coming at them. It's just a case of this has affected me. And now, unfortunately, it's just bottled up into this, So back to my original question, how were those initial conversations?
I'm smiling only because you're asking a great question, which often is not the follow-up that most people think of. And I think it's because you've been so open about your own path. So your mind goes there and you're like, these things are difficult to bring up. So I'll bring up a couple things because obviously you have different family members and impacts your relationship with them differently. My parents are the most loving people in the world. They care a lot about everyone. Like they were there for me and my little brother. But the way that they were there, the way that they showed affection and emotion and coddling and support, maybe not coddling is the wrong term, right? Because that sounds soft, but like support and comfort was by doing. Taking me to every single event, taking me to every practice, being there at practice for me. I got an award. They were the first one in a row, and I'm like, how are my parents doing this while they're having to take my brother back and forth to chemo treatments? Like that's amazing. So I never felt at the time like they weren't doing something and that this stuff was piling up on me. Now looking back on it, going through therapy, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way to my parents, it's just we were given different tools and we all emote and share differently. Is my dad was the consummate optimist because that was his protection mechanism. Todd's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. He's going to get through this. Well, as a kid, you're not given the green light to talk about what you're scared about when your dad's saying everything's going to be okay. It helps you in a way because you're like, oh, that's a good sign that my dad's saying that. But you're not sharing what you're fearful of. What happens if he dies? Where does he go if he dies? I'm afraid of that scenario. If he dies, the other people in my family die, right? So, and my mom's very much a introvert and it gives silent treatment a lot when things aren't going well, not because that's just the coping mechanism she developed. So I never at a young age in my house had the ability to talk about the stuff that was bothering me, but it wasn't for lack of support. It was just lack of this was how we handle things, right? So that's number one. Number two, I had to be very concerned with my older brother being upset that it looked like I was using his sickness as a scapegoat for how I felt. And so I had to be very direct and honest at the beginning and go, my brother didn't choose to get cancer. He didn't choose to be in these accidents. Life chose him in that way. And then I was the collateral damage from that. And that's not my brother's fault in any way. Now, there are family members, I won't say who, like connected family members, things like that, that don't love that I talk about this, right? Because in this, we have the perfect life now because we've got kids or we've got, a family that's intact. Why does that stuff need to be discussed again? Well, you know what? I discuss it because I don't mind being raw and honest when it helps other people. That's why I discuss it. So I hope that helped answer your question is like, I think we're put in situations at young ages where it's like, it's not even that someone's saying to you, don't speak about this. This is not stuff that we talk about. I hear that a lot in families. that wasn't it. It was like the coping mechanisms that we had, they weren't there for me. So I kept it internal. And I thought, Riley, you'll probably appreciate this, that Players Tribune article that Ben Gordon, the NBA player, had. He played for the Bulls. And if anyone wants to read one of the most revealing, vulnerable stories ever, read his Players Tribune article. I want to say it's from 3 years ago. And he goes, I'm playing for the Bulls, and I went through all this shit as a kid, and all I'm thinking is, what is some middle-aged white woman with white hair and glasses going to tell me about my life that I don't already know? Take the what seems like derogatory comment about what the person looks like out of it. What Ben is sharing there is, what is someone that I can open up to, a psychologist, going to tell me about my situation that I've been playing over and over in my head again so many times that I don't already know? That's the perception that a lot of people have of therapy, because that's what they show in the images. That person takes my ball of yarn and they untangle it in my head. That's not what therapy is. Therapy is giving you an opportunity to unload the shit that you need to unload, and then find skill sets to be able to get around the trauma and heal from it. It's not going to the well and that person solving your problems for you, right? So I hope that motivates people to want to open up and share, because it's getting that air out of that balloon and it not to pop.
Yeah, that's fun. Like it's funny. So you even said it about like the psych ward and mental hospital and stuff too, and it's kind of similar to like the Ben Gordon thing. Like it's it still is. I mean, maybe it's a little less than before, but it's so intimidating, those words, like therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, mental institute, psych ward. Like all those things are such like aggressive words that we've obviously built up over time, compared to like whatever, like go to like the ear, nose, throat doctor, or you go to like the dentist or whatever, like it's just crazy how like that's where our brains have taken us.
Right. Dive deeper into that topic, because it's an important topic to discuss, right? And it doesn't get enough play. So let's compare, right? You see hospital after hospital for physical health. They're like, we need to make this hospital more like a hotel. We need to make it inviting. Guess who needs a fucking hotel? A person who's going through a major mental health crash does not need to lay on a fucking metal bed cot that's got a tiny little mattress with wooden furniture that like was in a college dormitory because they're afraid of you hurting yourself. Like, this is what is needed, and that's not given, right? And then, I was in the hospital, and like the people that they are in there, it's like there's no separation of who's dealing with what, right? So it's like in a physical health hospital, the oncology ward, okay, it's all the people who are dealing with cancer. Well, when you're in the psych ward, it's all these different people with different symptoms, and you're like, immediately your mind goes to, I'm not hearing voices, but that guy or that gal is. Does that mean I'm going to start hearing voices because I'm here? And then you start comparing yourself, and you go, I'm getting shock therapy, but they're not getting shock therapy. So does that mean I'm the most fucked up of the fucked up people in this room right now? Like, we're treating this so badly. It's incredible. And then the most important point, Riley, that I'll probably get to is, take the average kid who's dealing with just shit, and their parents want to get them help, whatever help is. The terms that you just threw out there, where the fuck does anyone know where to begin? Where is the roadmap, right? Like, some people go to the general practitioner. Well, guess what? Here in the US, going to the general practitioner means you're getting a pill thrown at you to solve this thing, because the majority of psychotropics that are prescribed by your primary care physician, okay? So start with that. But from there, do you go to the psychologist? Do you go to the psychiatrist? Does the psychologist talk to the psychiatrist? Do you go to the residential treatment facility center? Can you afford to go to the residential treatment center? Should you go to the residential treatment before you go to the psychologist, or before you go to the psychiatrist, because you should try meds before you go somewhere where you're taking time off of work or off of school? Okay, do you go to PHP, partial hospitalization program? Do you go to an inpatient hospitalization program? What is the difference between an IOP and just a general hospital or a mental hospital? There is no linearity to any of this shit. And they want you at your worst to be able to navigate that system. How the fuck are we supposed to do that?
Yeah.
So sorry to get about it, but it's ridiculous.
I know. I mean, I appreciate the passion of just, it's just sad to see, honestly. Like, it's just from the outside, like, this could be very preventable about, we're already going into an uncomfortable space, and now we're uncomfortable about going into this space even more because of the terms that are attached, because we just don't know, especially parents and stuff like that. So, but I want to kind of rewind a little bit. We glanced over that support, that initial support from your Florida Panthers owner. I think we're seeing it now. We're seeing that small shift that's happening. We're seeing change, which is important. I mean, we got a long ways to go in all leagues across the board. We're seeing it in the NBA. We got figures like Kevin Love. We got figures like DeMar DeRozan. We got figures like Uninterrupted with LeBron and what he's doing with the shop. We're seeing it in the NHL. We got figures like Carey Price, Jonathan Drouin. How important was it for you to, obviously being, I guess, a smaller fish in a big pond, like a major sports league, how important was it for you to have that initial support when realistically, like you said, nobody was talking about it at this time?
Yeah, so I think Vinny took a ton of the heat off me by saying 3 months, because you're not then at that point where you're like, I need to get back in a week or else I'm screwed. The flip side to that is once I got to the 3-month mark, because things weren't getting better, I then started freaking out, right? And I still one of the guys who's on our board is Vinny's best friend. So through that relationship, still have a lot of good feelings towards the Panthers organization. And probably not surprisingly, you saw that the Panthers were the first team to announce, although it had to change over time, but we're going to try to hold on to our employees as long as we can during the pandemic and not let anyone go. That shows the fabric of the man, right? Now, when you're talking about support, Tyler, there's other things in there, and there are nuances, and you and Riley can certainly agree or disagree with me on these. I love that we're having more people talk. I don't know that we're talking the right way yet, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give you a very good example. So you brought up Kevin Love, you brought up DeMar DeRozan. When I go into a room of kindergartners up through CEOs, and I put the pictures of these folks up on the wall, I say, these are the biggest celebrities in our world as it pertains to mental health. What do you know about their mental health? Kevin Love had anxiety and a panic attack. Kanye West has bipolar. Kate Spade died by suicide. DeMar DeRozan has depression. We know the tidbits of the name of the celebrity and the label. Off of the heels of what I shared with you, of those 3 things I noticed on the websites are the biggest messages in mental health. If all we're hearing from each new celebrity is celebrity name and disorder, it's doubling down on the existing erroneous messages. It maybe is giving more permission to people to say, if you struggle with this thing called depression by having this list of 5 symptoms of this group of 20 or more for 2 weeks, then you fall into this category. Okay, they're giving some more permission. But for all the people whose minds we actually have to change, when we hear Dak Prescott depression, how many football fans are going, okay, that's Dak. He's in that 1 in 5 group, but that's not me. Let's let him talk during May's Mental Health Awareness Month, but that's not me. That's why the conversation has to change to, I was in a major bus accident. I saw friends pass away. I saw friends get injured.
So you would like to hear more bulk about what? Yeah, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have bipolar, but explain to me why you think that, why you think you the reason for this illness or this whatever.
Riley, isn't that what connects us? If 100%. You went into a room, and we'll use Tyler's example because I keep going on the bus. If you go into a room and you go, I've got this thing called PTSD. What percentage of the people are relating to you versus I was in a major accident and I lost people in my life, right? Those are 2 commonalities. Who hasn't lost a person in their life at a young age? I don't know a person on this planet, sadly, right? Unless they have a very small family and not outside of that family. So who hasn't lost someone and who hasn't been in an accident? Maybe not to that level, but the connectivity and the reason the name of the organization is Same Here is I'm not saying, Tyler, same here. You had PTSD and I had PTSD. Riley, you have depression. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Tyler and Riley, you're a human being and I'm a human being. And as being a human being, we've been through challenging life events. Let's talk about those challenging life events, because the bullshit of the labels is what the pharmaceutical industries want out there because it separates us further. And I'm sorry if I'm being the bad guy or the bull in the china shop by saying that. I know it's got its place for insurance and we need it. I understand that we need to make organization out of chaos to try to help people understand what they're going through. But here's what the issue is that happens. I'm in the anxious group. You're in the depressed group. I'm in the OCD group. You don't understand what I'm going through. I don't understand what you're going through. If you could find me a person on this planet who has grade A depression without any of the symptoms of anything else, I'd love to fucking meet that person. It doesn't happen. Our brain goes through these challenging life events. Our nervous system shifts to a place of oversympathetic response. We become dysregulated and we have symptoms. And the symptoms are similar in some cases and they're different in some cases. But what we do is we bucket people into these different categories and it makes us separate. So it makes us separate into sick and healthy. And even within the sick, it makes us into all these different sick categories. So the mission is, and why, I love coming on and talking with guys like you, and the work that you're doing is you're revealing people's stories. When you call it the bulk and the meat, Riley, the bulk and the meat needs to be what I would say is primary and only as a starting point. I'll give you one more analogy that I hope is helpful. We're all walking around in a school being told to go into classes, but no one knows they're in the fucking school. Think about that for a second. Go to math class, go to science class, go to English class. But wait a second, I don't realize I'm in a school right now. Why are some people going into math and English? It's because you're all in the fucking school and you all need to learn different courses. But we're not told we're all in the school because we're not told we're all victims, so to speak, or victims may be the wrong term, that we're all affected by our mental health. So no one knows that they're all in the school looking at other people going in those classes going, I guess they're going to learn in there, but I'm just going to keep walking in whatever structure I'm in right now.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
And
like sorry, Riley, go ahead. No, I was just going to talk about like the choice words. I think that is like something once again, like every time we do this podcast, I look forward to, learning something new and connecting with an individual that I never thought I'd connect with in a space that I never thought I'd be connecting with that individual in. And I think the perfect thing that you just outlined is the choice words. And being able to not continually just label it as, and have those strong labels that, people can get scared of. And that's okay, just because we're all still learning every day. But I think even when I relate it to like my public speaking engagements, I think the biggest things that people will relate to is when I'm able to emphasize that unfortunately, we went through something that I hope never, ever happens to anybody again. But at the end of the day, I am able to resonate and connect with people who haven't gone through something that traumatic or went through that much grief, but I'm still able to connect because their story has meaning, their story has depth, their story has layers, and I'm allowed to connect with whatever thing, just instantly comes to my mind. So I think, I just had a thought. I didn't have a question, but I think it's just like, I love that choice word. And I love that being able to.
That's probably why you're having the success that you're having, Tyler, is because, your story is such a big piece of who you are. It didn't default to let me start with when I'm doing my public speaking, what my label is, right? I'm not saying that your label's not, I don't know, right? Because I haven't seen, but everyone knows the story of Humble. When I say everyone, if you're in the sports world, right, or you follow TV, it's a pretty well-known story that happened. That disarms everyone else in that room. The second you open up and share that, people take a deep breath and go, I can be me.
Yeah.
And that's freaking huge. Yeah. And it doesn't, I grew up in an era where the veterans would be sitting at the tables at bagel stores, eating by themselves, having the hat on with the war that they fought in, and thinking to myself as a little kid, why is that guy sitting by himself? Why is no one sitting with him? And then you'd ask adults and they'd go, he went through a war that no one else can understand. He can only relate to the people who went through that war. Now what I know about mental health, I'm like, that's a bunch of bullshit. And that's not to downplay at all what military people go through. And it's instead to say we should be able to relate to that person because we've all been through our own war. Your bus accident, which I'm sure is one of many things you've been through in your life, Tyler, that is your war, right? My brother's sicknesses and the loss of my friends, that was my war. And when we connect based on, it frustrates the hell out of me when I hear someone say, well, that person, that mom lost her son to suicide, so she can only talk to other people who've lost their sons to suicide. Are we really going to be that narrow where we're not going to allow pain to support pain? and commonality to support commonality, if that's the lanes that we're playing in, you're not going to meet many people in your lives who've been through exactly what you've been through. When
Yeah.
pain is common, that's where we can support one another.
I think that's a good segue to our next kind of topic too, is like, I know the suicide topic is hard to speak about, and I think it's probably one of the reasons why Ty, you had the date and the post. Actually, maybe you take this question because you had it formulated pretty good.
Yeah, no. So Riley and I definitely wanted to cover this topic. On April 24th of last year, you shared an image of the bright students who have lost to suicide in those recent months. You know, the college athlete space. I think my initial thought is, you kind of touched on it in your caption a little bit, but what can we as a society and as individuals do to help prevent this horrible trend of deaths from happening, especially to, like you said, these bright-minded individuals who are, you know, playing a sport they love and, you know, having an education at the same time. You know, how do we stop this trend? And I think, I mean, it's probably a tough question to just completely answer right off the hop, but I think that's the biggest thing, is because, like you said, I mean, these are bright people that we are losing far too soon. And yeah.
Well, listen, I love that you brought the question up, because it allows me to go back to that feeling of the swallow a bottle of pills, and where did that come from, right? So my belief is, with suicide, stress and trauma build in the nervous system. I'm holding hands like this for a reason. The way that plaque builds in our arteries. Plaque cumulatively builds, and if we don't do anything about it, or enough about it, and we eat more, saturated fats, let's say, the arteries get clogged more, combined with our genetics, and then we have a heart attack, and we could die from that heart attack. I think what happens with stress and trauma is it builds and builds and builds, and the bridge starts to bend, and eventually, when the bends too much, the bridge breaks, right? So what does the bridge breaking mean? Well, if we're wired for survival, food, shelter, water, clothing, and we get the dopamine hit every day we wake up from the things that I said I wasn't getting when I woke up each morning, I need to go to work. I need to accomplish this. I need to make this amount of money. Riley has a young kid so that I can support my family, right? So it's fun playing hockey, so I love doing that, but I also get to put the roof over my wife's house and my kid's house. No derogatory comment to women there. I'm sure wives contributing as well. I'm just trying to use Riley as an example, right? So we get this dopamine hit of the survival mechanism. When the stress trauma build eventually makes that break, I think what happens, we're in the what polyvagal theory calls dorsal vagal part of our nervous system, where shutdown happens, metabolic shutdown. And in metabolic shutdown, just like the computer goes, too many windows open, blue screen, got to turn off, or the phone goes, you've been in the sun for too long, got to take it out of the sun, got to shut down, and got to stop working. I think the brain goes, it's time to shut down. And I think the thoughts that develop at that point become, how do we get this system out of here instead of in here? So it's the opposite thought. Literally, instead of food, shelter, water, clothing, it starts seeing these objects as things we can hurt ourselves with, things that we can get out of that situation with. I'm saying that to everyone because I want everyone to know that's not a conscious thought. I can't deny that there are some suicides where we lose people to conscious thought. We're human beings, of course it happens. But if the scenario that I just described is the majority, is even 30% of the suicides that happen, and guess what? How many suicides happen where there's no note left, where the commentary always goes, you never would have thought, not them. I hope that's making people think about suicide in a different way. So if we can be forward in talking about suicide and saying, these are how the thoughts develop. Here's what to look out for, right? We have a tool that's called Lifesaver. LIFE is 4 different words, an acronym for look around for, right? Initiate dialogue, find a safe place and stay there, explain what's going on. Why do we have that LIFE? Because we want to be proactive in first-person suicide prevention. Right now, we have all the tools in the world for what do I look? Oh, I should look out if Tyler's giving away possessions. That's a pretty obscure thing. I'm going to be very blunt about it. that doesn't really get, okay, if we see it, does Tyler have a plan? Ask him if he has a plan. Okay. What are we telling Tyler that he needs to look out for in himself? We have stop, drop, and roll for suicide prevention, but we don't have first person suicide, for fire safety, but we don't have a stop, drop, and roll for suicide prevention. And that's where the concept of lifesaver comes in. And so hopefully in a roundabout way of explaining your answer and then explaining an answer to your question, then bring it back to center is we have to educate on how suicide happens, that it happens to us, that it's a cumulative build over time, and that any of us are susceptible to that. Until that happens, shame doesn't go away. Until it happens, it's that guy or that gal died that way. Poor them that they felt so bad that they made that decision. Let's not talk about it, right? So educating on how it happens, that it impacts all of us. Then in that, giving first person tools so you know what to look out for, you know who to call and how to reach out so you get the help that you need. I'll end my little soapbox thing on this. If Riley, you were having a heart attack in the middle, God forbid, of New York City, you'd have no problem grabbing someone next to you going, I'm having that pain in the left side of my jaw. I'm having that pain down the left side of my arm. Can you get me to a hospital right now? You'd have no problem doing that. No one on the planet would have a problem doing that. But if you started having suicidal thoughts in the middle of Times Square, you wouldn't want to talk to anyone about it. You'd be afraid that the person who you're saying it to would be like, this fucking guy's weird. What's wrong with him? Why? They're both heart attacks of our system or attacks of our system. We have to get to a place where reaching out and holding on to that stranger and going, I'm having those thoughts of self-harm. Can you bring me to a safe place? Is as common as I'm having the heart attack feelings. Can you bring me to a hospital?
Yeah, I think it's so important to and you obviously are doing this, so you're cognizant of it as like you guys doing your scale work and then putting that into schools for young kids too, because I know for me, one of the hardest points of my life, I think it goes hand in hand with any sort of big transition. When I went away to school, it was the first time I went away from home. I was 17 years old, so I was pretty young, and now I'm going to play on Notre Dame, big D1 scholarship, very high end educationally. And I had no grasp of that because my first 16 years of my life were pretty easy. Hockey, half-assed school, parents were great, friends were great, everything was great. And then it changed. But I just never thought of I never was brought up even having to worry about this scale because I was always happy, So then I think when I transitioned into my college career and then to the NHL, I had trouble dealing with those transitions. And then it came out maybe a little too much alcohol, got in trouble, pressure, all these things that led to kind of depressive thoughts, a lot of anxiety, not being able to perform the way I want to. So I think it's really cool what you guys, and both my parents are teachers too. I think did you say yours were too? Or
yeah, my parents were both teachers. Dad was a principal, mother was a language teacher. Yeah.
So just developing that ability to speak and that ability to communicate at a young age, so you're comfortable doing it as you get older, I think is really cool. And I'm sure that's probably why you guys are doing it, if you can speak on that a bit.
Yeah. So I tease a little bit the polyvagal science, and I didn't know what polyvagal was. It was invented by a guy named Dr. Stephen Porges in the mid-90s. All I knew was I didn't go from this place of being happy to being sad, the way that you see in the commercials, right? What I was joking about with the cartoon commercials. What I felt like I was thriving in a really good place. Then very simply, I felt like I was surviving. And then it felt like I was crashing, right? So those were the three places that I saw on my continuum, so to speak. So I was like, that doesn't sound like disorder. That sounds like states of mind shifting, of being in a good place, being in a place, and then literally being in a spiraling place out of control. So that realization sounded linear to me. I was like, that's a buildup over time, like the plaque in the arteries. Why aren't we teaching it this way? So then I learned about polyvagal, and I learned that these different phases of the nervous system, we go from this place of psychological flexibility where I'm in the parasympathetic response of my nervous system. I'm having a talk with my friends Tyler and Riley. Things are good. Oh shit, a car accident happened out there? I got to go help that person. Car accident gets taken care of. Person's okay. They get brought to the hospital. I find everything's right. I'm coming back and I'm having a conversation with Tyler and Riley. That's psychological flexibility. That's being able to be in the moment, take care of something volatile, then being back in the moment. Volatile, back in the moment. Volatile, back in the moment. When the volatility happens too often, eventually the nervous system goes, you're putting me on alert way too many times. And it can either be an event that keeps happening or it could be a thought, right? So, Tyler, I know I keep using your story as an example, but it's relatable to everyone. Oh, shit, I was in a bus accident. Cars can get into an accident. Planes can get into an accident. Other buses can get into an accident. Now, every time you're on the road, your mind is going, what happens if accident happens? What happens if accident happens? Our nervous system doesn't know the difference between the thought of a threat and the actual threat itself. So now we go from this state of psychological flexibility to now this over sympathetic response where it's like, I can't get out of my own head. It feels like there's too many windows open on my computer. And then that explains the shutdown. Too many windows open. Now the system goes, you need to do something to preserve your energy, because if not, the whole system's going to fall apart. So it goes into that shutdown mode. So Riley, to your question, we took that and we put that across a 6-point scale: thriving, gliding, surviving, fluctuating, struggling, sinking, and we put emojis on it. Why 6 places? Because the most common question we ask each other every single day is, hey, Riley, how you doing? Hey, Tyler, how are you doing? And the most common answer we give is, I'm all right, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm meh, which is no answer whatsoever. It's a middle of the road answer, right? If we give common language, the same way that we have a thermometer that goes in our mouth and you say, I'm 98.6, I'm normal, I'm 101, I've got a low grade fever, I'm 103, I've got a high grade fever. We needed that same language. And I'll challenge you a little bit, Riley, to think back to being a kid. When you say you were happy, I was happy too when I was a kid. But if I had taught you the different places on that scale and the thoughts and behaviors that come in on those decent places, you wouldn't be able to describe that every single day you were thriving.
For sure.
You'd be able to describe scenarios where I'm in this fluctuating, struggling piece where grandpa passed away, or I didn't make the team that I thought I would, right? There's an accumulation of that over time, like that plaque in the arteries, that we're not giving the skills and the tools for kids, parents, teachers to understand that stuff. And if we're not giving them the tools, we're just going to keep repeating the same issues over and over again. And as technology's gotten faster and there's more demands on us, we have text messages and direct messages and emails and rapid fire. The nervous system can only take so much. So we need these tools now. So I hope that helped explain to you why we implement the scale in schools, is because we need a linear way to track that and see the trends over time.
Yeah, no, that's unreal. I think it's great. And I remember my dad still teaches part-time, and he teaches teachers. So when they go back into the classroom, they have a higher up credit in phys ed or whatever it is. And he was just talking about for his elementary teachers, like stoplight, like red, green, yellow. And then if a kid lights up yellow or green or yellow or red, you just kind of know to have an extra eye on them, or you know how to like focus on them a little more, talk to them a little more, maybe get them to express themselves a little more. And that's just developing those skills, right? As you grow older, I think it's really important. But I'm going to change a topic here. Kind of going to go back to what we were talking about a little bit before. But your perspective, I always love seeing your posts and your perspective on the way articles are written and the words used, and whether it's, I think the one that sticks in my mind is Taylor Hawkins' death. And, he was, I think through the media, he was described as this party animal rocker, like another rocker dying because of abusing drugs for his wanting to party, whatever. But you had these quotes about how Taylor Hawkins was part of the Foo Fighters, one of the biggest rock bands of the 90s, that grunge era. He hated performing. Like he didn't like being on stage. And you kind of broke it down in a way that was like, holy shit. Like everybody is looking at this article in one way, that this guy just blew his life away. He had money, he had fame, but he blew his life away because he liked drugs, he liked partying. But there's such an alternative story that we all are blinded by because the media just puts it in our heads in a certain way. Like, I don't know, like I don't know what my question is, like your ability to see it in this way, where did that come from? I mean, obviously your story has a big influence, but like, it's just crazy that we're so blinded by this. I don't know if you can speak on that at
Or
all.
blinded by it because there's powers that be that sell us on seeing it a different way, right? Maybe I'll end up in a ditch after this, this podcast gets released because I say it enough times and eventually someone's going to come knocking on my door. But there's a lot of money to be made when, let's use the Foo Fighters example specifically, right? So when you have this major drummer for this major band and the only narrative that comes out of it is druggy who partied, right? That's its own category. The same way when Vincent Jackson dies in his hotel room, the brick shithouse of a wide receiver who played for the Bucks, and they go, oh well, the reports in the police reports from 3 years ago said that he was arrested on a DUI. He clearly was abusing alcohol. Okay, so now you've got Foo Fighters, party animal, right? Addict. You've got Vincent Jackson. You've got DUI and alcoholic, right? Okay. Then you've got, so many other examples of deaths that have happened to celebrities, right? And what happens is overdose, addiction, suicide, opioid. Listen to all these words that I'm sharing that the media claims are all different things. Okay. This person died that way because they're a party animal. This person died that way because they had a death wish of overdosing. This person died this way because suicide was a choice that they made. That sounds like all different things, and the media gets to get your eyeballs because when it sounds like different things, it's the bright, shiny object of what's the gossip around that I need to find out because, ooh, that's really interesting. When you ask, where do I see it from a different angle, is my mind, because I went through it and was treated in that same system and then realized, holy fuck, these are just different examples of the same thing. The guy who dies by suicide, the guy who dies by overdose, the guy who dies by cirrhosis of the liver, the guy who dies by being a quote alcoholic, they're all people who are escaping the emotional pain. That their death looks differently in the way that the media describes it. And then probably what you saw in the latest post that I put out there is, how the hell is the CDC releasing a year and 11 months after the data was available that that we were up 30% in deaths related to alcohol during the first year of the pandemic? We just realized this now? No, it's because they split up at the time in May of 2021, 5 months after those numbers came in. They told us that suicide was flat year over year from 2020 to 2019, trying to sell to us that the pandemic didn't impact people's mental health. And by the way, again, back to not being political with this stuff. I'm not trying to say, well, was the lockdowns a different? Take the measures out of it. I'm talking about merely living through a friggin' pandemic. They're going to try to convince us that people's mental health wasn't impacted. One, that wasn't true about suicides because they put suicides in a vacuum by itself. Two, if mental health is cumulative, looking just at the numbers, the year of the first year of the pandemic is not going to tell you the full story because you're going to see more and more people dropping, sadly, 2 years and 3 years later. But here's the bigger, more direct point. They separated from 6 months out what the suicide numbers were year over year. And then 6 months later, they tell you what the overdose rates number, which when you combine those two, suicide and overdose, it was the highest on record of those two ever. In 2020, the first year of the pandemic. But we don't hear that because they're separated by 6 months that they're released. So when I see the alcohol deaths, which are released now a year and 11 months after, they're not even including in alcohol deaths people who overdosed, let's say, right? Because they mixed drugs with alcohol and they're talking about literally physically cirrhosis of the liver and all that stuff. All these things that people did are all different forms of the same thing. Back to Theo, and I may be giving more credit than most people, but he calls it's all cousins living in the same house. But because it's cousins, people think of them as different families. They're all living in the same house, all part of the same thing. And we as a society have to get together and go, It's psychological pain from the trauma that we lived through, and we're all trying to deal with it in different ways, maladaptive ways. And so we die in different ways prematurely. But guess what? The core issue at the same is we're all going through a ton of shit and don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. You know what? Rouse, I have another question for sure, but Rouse, we got to get him on for another episode anyways. Because we have taken a bunch of your time, Eric, and but I have another question. You have had a tremendous amount of powerful conversations, whether it's the families of the college athletes that we have lost to suicide, whether it's your Influencer Alliance members, Hayden Hurst, whoever it may be. I mean, you've had a tremendous amount of powerful conversations from a wide variety of situations and environments that these individuals have come from and been able to get through. And, but what is it? I read your one caption, and I know that the families of the college athletes, it seems as though every one of those families wants to reaffirm one thing, and we're a team, and that we need to be a team. But all of these conversations you've had, is there a major message that you have just come to terms with, that it's just like, this is it? It's going to take a long time to get there. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but truly it's an open-ended question. But Eric, what is it?
Mental health has become a business. It was a business before I ever got into it, and I didn't know until I then started peeking under the hood. And I don't know that it gets better until people drop the ego and are willing to hold hands and work together. And there's attempts at it. I'm not going to mention the specific names, but this coalition, that coalition, right? Then you look at like what their individual campaigns are during May's Mental Health Awareness Month, and like they're not even sharing each other's stuff, right? Like it's like they might put it in each other's Instagram story or something like that. There's no consistency in the message. And in a topic that's this nuanced, that has been promoted to us in the opposite way that we need to understand it, the only way it changes is consistency. So where does that leave me, and why do I like working with the Rileys of the world and bring people together? Because I know they're going to be doing their own things, right? Everyone is ambitious and wanting to do their own things. But what I've been spending the last 4 years doing is going, all these big nonprofits out there, they all have their own MO, right? Like, I'm going to throw something out there, and it's controversial, but I'm going to say it. When we lose someone to mass shootings, why is every executive director of every single nonprofit coming out there and going, this had nothing to do with mental health? It's disingenuous and wrong, and we are hurting society by saying that. Can't you say in the same sentence that people who deal with major mental health challenges are less likely to be the perpetrator of crimes than be in a crime themselves, be a victim of a crime, and at the same time go, unfortunately, in this particular case, to shoot up 20 kids, that person was dealing with something very major that impacted their mental health, where they weren't seeing the world in a rational place. Why do they not say that, if you think about it for a second? They don't say it because their donor bases are the people who believe in that old school model of, let's protect the people who have this designation of mentally ill. And if we tell people this has nothing to do with this mental illness thing as it's been defined before, guess what? More people will keep donating to us because we're protective of that group. That doesn't get society better. So I'm willing to raise my hand and go, guess what? Even though you all support us to the tune of thousands of people on the social media channels and you ask us to come out to events, this is unfortunately part of, not saying the whole reason, part of why we have mass shootings is because we're not dealing with the core issue of people's mental health, and that contributes to this. If that makes people not donate to us who are looking at the old model of the mental illness only model, I'm okay with that, because I'm moving the narrative forward that we all need to work together to how do we support these people who end up in these places because they're not given the tools, they're not given the resources. I'm not trying to make them sympathetic figures. What I'm trying to say is we have ails in society that we're not cleaning up because there's a gravy train in money that comes around by not talking about it the right way. So I know I give long answers to short questions. I apologize for that, but like they're nuanced answers. Is the only way we get better is if we hold hands and we say, this topic applies to all of us. There's not a person who's immune to it. It fluctuates up and down throughout the course of our lives. We all need to work on it. And here's the skills and the drills and the tools that we need in order to learn to work on it. Oh, by the way, that happened with physical health in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Why the hell can't we do it with mental health?
Yeah.
I hope we will get there some way, but right now we're not there.
Yeah.
And so,
think about like it's like the tension relief there. Like even when you say that, if that was like ingrained in your mind, knowing that like you could be more like understood and you could actually speak and you could feel comfortable, like, I don't know, just relieve so much tension. And then compound on that, like pushing all of the natural ways we can feel better, whether like the integrative stuff or breathing and just physical health, the importance of nutrition, all of those things can go such a long way. So it's, I mean, even like just when you said that, like it just
you talked about terminology, Riley, right? What do we call all the natural things? What are the terms that have been used to call those
like,
things?
Like if you
Eastern
do yoga, you're like
holistic alternative, right? It's the foremost bastardized terms. We came up with the term STAR exercises: stress and trauma, active releasing and rewiring. It's a gym for your brain. So that they can't commandeer a word that's already been out there. Let's make a new word that they don't get to own, right? And let's put the science behind it and put it out there so that people can't take ownership of it. So you probably, Tyler, in answering your question, you hear a little bit of the frustration in my voice because the answers are there.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it simple, like, oh, you snap your finger and you feel better. But if people understood, it's a linear build, I work on it, I try to get it back to a place of pre-trauma, pre-stress. It's just like an ankle where when I turn it, it's never going to be fully back to that tight ligament tendon connection in my bones and my muscles the way that it was before. But I could rehab it back to a good place. Then there would be no shame in talking about it, like Riley just said. Like, Riley, when you shared that, I heard the pain in your voice a little bit. I hope you don't mind me calling it out in a collaborative way. I guess because, and Tyler, you might feel this. When you go out on stage enough times and you share your truth, you don't give a fuck what anyone thinks anymore, right? Now, it's harder for you because you're an NHL player, and so you've got the issue of there's a lot more fans than there are just people in the stands when we go talk, right? And you're also dealing with contracts, and you're also dealing with an image of how people think athletes are supposed to be. So you've got a lot of factors working against you. But what I can encourage everyone with, and Tyler, you can back me on this if you agree with it, is once you get over the point where you don't give a shit anymore, it's the most freeing fucking feeling in the world. And I don't care if I'm on, a news station versus a morning show versus a podcast versus someone's Instagram live that there's 10 people on. I get to just say whatever the fuck is on my mind and what I feel, and I don't care if people judge it. It's awesome.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, I think even like with Riley and I, like being able to, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I like that was obviously our original motto, and that will always be our motto. But I think now it's just a case of obviously our relationship has grown, but it's just a case of this is it. Like we're doing what we love, and this is our passion now. And whatever we say, like, that's it. Like, this is our podcast. We're allowed to speak your mind. And I think that's a perfect way to end, Eric. I was really looking forward to this one because I've followed you for a while. And for any of our listeners still with us, please, please, please follow the same here, Global Mental Health Movement. Just what Eric covers in his posts and the captions and how articulate he goes into it. It's altered my perspective in a beneficial way, and I think it will do the same for you. So Eric, please continue to do what you do because you're an amazing, amazing human being. And I think on behalf of Riley and I think we are going to have you on again for sure. But for now, thank you so much for your insight, for being candid and being able to have this conversation today.
And I'll let you guys end on, I think it's awesome to have two male figures, sports background, who are willing to have the uncomfortably comfortable or comfortably uncomfortable, however you say it, conversation. It's not on many platforms. A lot of the guys talking, they try to pair a male with a female to, soften up the tone a little bit, or have a licensed clinical, professional that's along with it, giving the specific science behind things. When it's two guys just shooting the shit and being open, it makes people listen and be like, that's conversational. So you guys should be very proud of what you're doing. It's awesome.